I grew up in a house where love wasn't shared equally. At least, that's how it always felt from my side of the dinner table. My name is Ivor, and if you ask my parents, I was the difficult child. Not because I got in trouble or did anything reckless, but because I was inconvenient. I wasn't the child they bragged about at family gatherings. That spotlight always belonged to my older brother, Ethan. Ethan was the golden boy, the one who could spill orange juice all over the carpet and still get a chuckle from Dad, while I got scolded for leaving a book on the couch. From the moment we were kids, I knew there was an invisible scale in my parents' hearts, and no matter what I did, it never tipped in my favor. I still remember one Christmas when I was 9. I had saved up coins from helping our neighbor Mrs. Carter with her groceries. It took me weeks, but I managed to buy a pair of gloves for Mom. I wrapped them in newspaper and tied the package with yarn. I couldn't wait for her to open it. When she finally did, she smiled politely, said thank you, and set them aside. Then Ethan handed her a drawing he had made, scribbles of a stick figure family with crooked smiles. Mom burst into tears, hugged him like he'd just gifted her the crown jewels, and said, "You're going to be an artist someday, my special boy." I sat there holding my empty hands, the gloves already forgotten. I too wasn't just at one time. It was every time. Report cards. Ethan could bring home a C and Dad would say, "That's okay, son. You're good at sports anyway." I'd bring home straight A's and Dad would glance at it once before asking if I helped set the table. Birthdays. Ethan got parties with balloons, cakes, and neighbors invited. Mine were often lumped into a family dinner with no decorations. But the worst part, they didn't even try to hide their favoritism. I'd overheard them one night when I was 12. I was supposed to be asleep, but the walls in our old house were thin. Mom's voice floated down the hall. "Ethan has such potential. He's going to be something great one day." And Dad replied, "Yeah, Ivor's smart, but she doesn't have that spark. She's more of a helper, not a leader." Those words branded themselves into my mind. A helper, not a leader. Maybe that's why I became obsessed with proving them wrong. From a young age, I poured myself into books, ideas, and little projects. I'd sketch inventions, design makeshift games for kids in the neighborhood, even organize lemonade stands that made more money than expected. But no matter how much effort I put in, my family dismissed it as hobbies. I wasn't the star of the family story. They made sure I knew that. Ethan, meanwhile, was given every opportunity. New basketball shoes, guitar lessons, private tutors. When I asked if I could join an art class I loved, Mom said, "It's too expensive, honey. You'll grow out of it anyway." But that same week, she bought Ethan a brand new guitar. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I'd have to work for it myself. So I did. I mowed lawns, babysat, tutored younger kids. My classmates thought I was just hardworking, but inside, it was more than that. Every dollar I earned felt like a tiny piece of freedom, proof that I wasn't as powerless as my family thought. Still, no matter what I achieved, the spotlight was never mine. One memory burns especially bright. It was my 15th birthday. I had been quietly writing short stories, pouring my heart into them late at night when the house was quiet. My English teacher had even encouraged me, saying I had a real gift. For my birthday, she submitted one of my stories to a local competition. Without telling me, a week before my birthday, she called me to her desk with a huge smile. "Ivor," she said, "you won first place." My heart soared. I could hardly breathe as she handed me the certificate and told me they'd print my story in the local newspaper. For the first time, I felt seen. On the night of my birthday dinner, I shared the news with my family. I waited, heart pounding, expecting pride. But do you know what my dad said? He chuckled and shook his head. "That's nice, honey, but no stories don't pay the bills. Maybe one day you'll find a real talent." Ethan smirked and muttered, "Nerd." And just like that, the moment I had dreamed of turned to ash. I excused myself from the table, went to my room and cried until my chest hurt. That was the night I made a silent promise. If they couldn't see me now, one day they would. Not with words, not with small victories, but with something so undeniable they couldn't laugh it off. But here's the thing about promises you make to yourself at 15. They don't come easy. For the next few years, life tested me in every way possible. The favoritism grew sharper as Ethan prepared for college. My parents bragged about him to everyone, how he was going to business school, how he'd make millions, how he was the future of the family. When I told them I wanted to apply to college too, they shook their heads. "We don't really have the money for that," Mom said. "Besides, you're more practical. You could just start working right away. That would suit you better." Suit me better? I wanted to scream. But instead, I swallowed the hurt and started filling out applications anyway, determined not to let their dismissal dictate my path. I didn't know it then, but those rejections, those small humiliations, they were the fire that would forge me into someone they'd never forget. At the time, though all I felt was invisible, still, I clung to my dream, to rise above, to prove them wrong. And even though I was still that overlooked daughter at the dinner table, deep inside, I was building something no one could see, yet a quiet strength that would one day explode in ways they could never imagine. Because little did my family know, the girl they ignored at 15 was already shaping into the woman who'd walk into their anniversary dinner years later. Not as the helper they thought she was, but as the CEO of an empire they didn't even know existed. And trust me, when that day came, the look on their faces was worth every single tear. But before we get there, let me tell you how I clawed my way through the years that followed the betrayal, the struggles, the small victories that stacked up until I was unstoppable. Because my revenge, it wasn't served in anger. It was served in silence, in success, and in the sweetest way possible, right under their noses. I thought getting into college would finally be my chance to step out of Ethan's shadow, to carve my own place in the world. But my parents made sure even that dream came with bruises. I had worked hard grades, extracurriculars, even late nights tutoring kids in the neighborhood just to save money for application fees. I remember staying up until 2 in the morning, my desk lamp barely keeping me awake, filling out essays that asked who I wanted to be in 5 years. My answer was always the same: independent, successful, free. When the acceptance letter came from the state university, I felt like I was holding a ticket to another life. I ran downstairs, letter in hand, heart pounding. "Mom, Dad." I got in. They looked up from the couch where Ethan was showing them his new laptop bought with Dad's investment money. Mom took the letter, scanned it quickly, and then sighed. "Oh honey, that's nice. But you know tuition is expensive. We can't help you with that right now," Dad added. "Besides, do you really need to go? You're more practical. A degree isn't for everyone." I stood there, stunned. Ethan had already announced he'd been accepted to a private business school, one that cost triple what my tuition would. And my parents had promised to make it work for him, but for me, nothing. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, anger buzzing in my veins. I wasn't going to let their lack of support stop me. If they wouldn't pay for college, I would. So I did. I applied for scholarships, financial aid, and every campus job I could find. My first year, I worked in the library, the cafeteria, and even as a note-taker for students with disabilities. I barely had time to breathe, but every paycheck was proof that I could survive without my parents' help. Still, they never missed a chance to remind me of my place. Whenever I came home on weekends, my achievements were ignored, while Ethan's every move was celebrated. He called once to brag at the dinner table about landing an internship through one of Dad's contacts. Everyone toasted to him. When I mentioned that I'd been selected as a research assistant by one of my professors, Dad shrugged and said, "That's just extra paperwork, right? Not a real job." I swallowed my heart and smiled, but inside, I was screaming. The worst blow came sophomore year. Ethan had gotten himself into trouble: bad grades, skipped classes, partying too much. One night, Mom called me in a panic. "Avor, we need your help. Ethan needs tutoring, and we don't want him to lose his scholarship. Can you come home for a few weeks? You're good at this stuff." I wanted to say no. Every part of me wanted to scream, "Figure it out yourselves. I'm not his safety net." But the guilt, the way I'd been trained my whole life to be the helper, kicked in. So I came home, I tutored him, I saved his semester. Do you think they thanked me? No. At dinner one night, Dad raised his glass and said, "Ethan really pulled through this semester. Shows he's got resilience." I sat there silently, my food untouched. It wasn't Ethan's resilience, it was my sacrifice. But of course, no one cared. I began to realize that no matter what I did, my family would never see me. I could give them everything, and it would still never be enough. And then came the betrayal that changed everything. During junior year, I had an idea for a project, an APP, actually. It started as a class assignment, something small that could help students find affordable textbooks by connecting directly with sellers. My professor loved it and encouraged me to develop it further. Excited, I shared it with Ethan one weekend when I was home. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd finally be proud of me. He listened, nodded slowly, then smirked. "That's cute, but it's not a real business." "Still, not bad for you." I brushed it off, used to his arrogance. But a month later, I found out he had pitched a very similar idea during one of his business school competitions. He didn't even bother to change the details. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "Relax, Avor. Ideas are free. Besides, you'll never actually build it. You don't have the resources. I'm just faster." I wanted to explode. He had stolen from me, and my parents sided with him. Dad even said, "Ethan's just being entrepreneurial. You should be flattered he thought your idea was worth anything." Flattered? I felt gutted. That night, I cried into my pillow until my throat ached. Not just because my brother had betrayed me, but because my parents treated my pain like a joke. But something inside me shifted. If Ethan wanted to play dirty, fine. He could keep stealing my scraps. Because while he was busy pretending, I was going to quietly build something real, something so solid he couldn't touch it. That was the birth of my resolve. I started working on the APP in secret. Late nights in the library, teaching myself coding, networking with students in computer science, Sketching business models in the margins of my notebooks. It wasn't easy. In fact, it felt impossible at times. I was juggling classes, jobs, and now this secret project that no one believed in. But every dismissive comment from my family, every betrayal from Ethan, became fuel. And though I didn't know it yet, that tiny flame I was protecting, the dream they laughed at, would one day explode into a fire so bright it would blind them all. Because revenge doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes in silence, in patience, in watching the people who underestimated you realize far too late that you were never the helper. You were the leader all along. Graduating college should have felt like a victory. Walking across that stage, diploma in hand, I wanted to believe I had finally proven my parents wrong. I had done it without their money, without their support. I had built myself from the ground up. But when I looked into the audience, there was no cheering section for me. My parents hadn't even come. They said Ethan's big networking event at his business school was more important. So I walked across that stage alone, smiling for the cameras of strangers, feeling both proud and painfully empty. I had no safety net, no cushion to fall back on. The day after graduation, while most of my classmates were taking vacations or celebrating, I was hunched over my laptop applying for jobs. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and I couldn't afford to wait for life to hand me anything. My first offer came from a mid-sized marketing firm in the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. The kind of job where people say, "At least you've got benefits." I took it, grateful but restless. Every morning, I'd ride the crowded subway, clutching my bag, telling myself this was just the beginning. I'd walk into the glass office, sit at my desk, and type reports for hours quietly, efficiently. My boss liked me because I never complained. My co-workers liked me because I picked up the slack. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "You weren't born to be invisible." And yet, invisibility was my reality at home. When I called my parents to tell them about the job, Mom said, "That's nice, honey. Ethan just got promoted at his internship. He's already supervising a team." Dad chimed in, "Yeah, your brother's really on track to greatness. We're so proud of him." I sat on the phone, listening to them gush, until I finally mumbled, "Okay, well, I've got to go." They didn't even ask how I was settling into the new city, or if I needed anything. To them, I was just filling space, waiting for Ethan to become the star of the family story. But while they were watching him, I was quietly planting seeds. The APP idea I had in college, the one Ethan had tried to steal, never left me. It haunted me, almost like it was begging me not to give up on it. So after long workdays at the firm, I'd go home, heat up leftovers, and sit at my tiny second-hand desk until midnight, coding, researching, planning. It was exhausting. Some nights, my eyes burned so badly I had to splash water on my face just to keep them open. But I kept going. My co-workers spent weekends at brunch or bars. I spent mine at the library or coffee shops with free Wi-Fi, building something no one believed in, and I told no one. Not Ethan, not my parents. It was mine, and I wasn't about to let them taint it. Still, their voices haunted me. I remember one Thanksgiving when I went home, already worn down from juggling work and my side project. At dinner, I tried to share that I was working on a little something outside my job. Ethan laughed, cutting me off. "Oh, Avor, you're always chasing hobbies. First writing, then art, now this. Why don't you just focus on your real job instead of playing entrepreneur?" The whole table laughed. With him, even MOM. And then Dad delivered the dagger. Ethan's right. You're not really a risk taker. Stick to something safe. Leave the big ideas to your brother. Safe. Helper. Invisible. I smiled tightly, excused myself, and went upstairs to my childhood room. I sat on the bed, staring at the wallpaper I'd once dreamed beneath and whispered to myself, one day, they'll regret this. One day, they'll see me. That night, I opened my laptop and worked until dawn. Because while they were laughing, I was building. The first version of my app was clunky, rough around the edges, but it worked. A simple platform connecting students to cheaper textbooks, cutting out the overpriced middleman. I launched it quietly, posting about it in small online forums, reaching out to student groups. At first, nothing. Weeks passed with only a handful of users. I thought maybe Ethan had been right that I was wasting my time. But then, little by little, downloads trickled in. A student emailed me saying my app saved her over $200 in one semester. Another said it let him afford books he otherwise would have gone without. And suddenly, it wasn't just an idea, it was helping people. I cried the night I saw the first 100 downloads. Not because it was a huge number, but because it was real. Still, I kept it quiet. At work, I was just the reliable employee. At home, I was just the practical daughter. But behind the scenes, I was building something that would one day shake the world. Of course, life wasn't done testing me. One afternoon, I got a call from MOM. She said, in her light, almost casual tone, "Honey, Ethan's having a tough time right now. Could you lend him some money? Just a couple thousand. You know you don't have many expenses." I nearly dropped the phone. At that point, I was living paycheck to paycheck, scraping by while building my dream. Yet she assumed I could sacrifice for Ethan again. I asked, why doesn't he ask you or Dad? "Oh, we've already helped him quite a bit," she said. "But you're his sister. Family helps family, right?" Family. That word, coming from them, tasted like ash. I wanted to shout, family doesn't mean using one child to clean up the messes of another. But instead, I said calmly, "I can't." "I'm sorry," she sighed, disappointed. "You've changed, Avor. You used to be so helpful. Helpful. Always the helper." That phone call hardened me. I realized I wasn't just building an app, I was building a way out. Out of their expectations, out of their control, out of the small box they kept trying to shove me into. And though I didn't know it yet, that quiet determination was about to collide with the first taste of real success so undeniable even Ethan wouldn't be able to laugh it off, because my story wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about rising, and every step I took away from being their helper brought me closer to the woman who would one day walk into that anniversary dinner, head held high, and watch their smug faces crumble. The first time I realized my app could be more than just a side project was on a rainy Tuesday night. I was sitting in my cramped apartment, laptop balanced on my knees, when I refreshed the dashboard and saw something that made my breath catch. Over 1,000 downloads. I stared at the screen, blinking, certain it was a glitch. But it wasn't. Word had spread. Students were recommending it to their friends. Professors were mentioning it in class. Even a small student newspaper had written about it. I pressed my hands to my face and really laughed for the first time in months. For once, I didn't feel invisible, but the celebration was short-lived. The more traction my app gained, the more pressure I felt. Users had feedback, bugs needed fixing, servers crashed, and I was still working a full-time job at the marketing firm, juggling deadlines during the day and coding at night until my eyes burned. I lived off instant noodles, slept for hours a night, and carried energy drinks in my bag like medicine. It was brutal. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered Ethan's smirk, my dad's words, helper, not leader, and I pushed harder. And then came the first betrayal of this new chapter. One weekend, against my better judgment, I mentioned to my parents that the APP was starting to do well. I didn't give details, but I was proud, and some foolish part of me still wanted their approval. Ethan was at the table too, swirling his wine glass. Dad raised an eyebrow. So, a little project. That's nice, honey. But don't get carried away. Real success comes from stability. That's what Ethan's learning. Ethan leaned forward, smirking. What's it called again? I hesitated, then told him. He repeated the name slowly, like he was carving it into memory. My stomach tightened, but I brushed the unease aside. 2 weeks later, I found out why my instincts had screamed. A friend from college messaged me in a panic. Hey, Avor, didn't you create this? Because Ethan just pitched the same idea at a business showcase. Same name, same concept, everything. I felt the air leave my lungs. He had done it again. He had taken my work, my blood, sweat, and sleepless nights and tried to make it his own. I called him immediately. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. Ethan, I said, voice trembling, what the hell are you doing? That's my APP. My name. My work. He chuckled, calm as ever. Relax, Avor. Business is about speed. You can't just sit on an idea and expect it to be yours forever. If you can't handle competition, maybe you're not cut out for this. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. It's not competition when you steal from your own sister. Call it what you want, he said lazily. But I'm the one who'll scale it. You'll burn out. You always do. And then he hung up. I sat in silence, heart pounding, rage boiling in my veins. For a moment, I thought about quitting. He had the connections, the charm, the backing of my parents. What chance did I have against all that? But then, something hardened inside me. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. This was survival. If I gave up now, Ethan would rewrite my story. He'd take everything I built and wear it like a crown, while I faded back into the role of helper. No, not this time. I worked harder. I pulled in favors from classmates in tech, begged a developer friend to help me fix bugs, learned more about servers and user experience than I ever thought possible. I applied for small grants, pitched to student organizations, scraped together every bit of energy I had, and slowly, painfully, it paid off. While Ethan bragged at networking events, my APP kept growing. By the end of that semester, we had over 10,000 users across 5 campuses. Students were saving money, spreading the word, leaving reviews that made me cry at night. Still, my family didn't care. At Christmas dinner, Dad announced proudly, Ethan's team just got an honorable mention at the regional business showcase. Everyone clapped. I quietly mentioned that my APP had reached 10,000 downloads. Ethan rolled his eyes. Downloads don't mean revenue. Anyone can make a freebie and call it success. The table laughed. I excused myself, went upstairs, and sat in my old room, staring at the glow of my phone screen. There in my inbox was an email from a small angel investor who wanted to meet. They saw potential. They believed in me. That night, for the first time, I didn't cry. I smiled, because I realized something vital. I didn't need my family's approval. I didn't need their validation, or their clapping, or their empty praise. I was building something real, with or without them. And while Ethan wasted energy trying to steal credit, I was already miles ahead, quietly laying the foundation for an empire he couldn't touch. The big break was coming. I could feel it in my bones, and when it hit, it wouldn't just change my life. It would rewrite my place in the family forever, because they thought I was small, invisible, replaceable, but soon they would see I wasn't just a helper. I was the storm they never saw coming. When I woke up the next morning, my eyes felt heavy from all the crying. I hadn't even bothered to take off my work clothes last night. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like forever, hearing my stepmother's words on repeat. "This is our house now." Something in me snapped. Not the kind of snapping where you lose control, no. This was sharper, clearer, like ice settling over fire. I got up, pulled out my laptop, and opened the file my mother had saved years ago. My inheritance deed. My name was right there, legally and undeniably, tied to the house my father and stepmother were sitting in like it was theirs. Not anymore, I whispered to myself. That day at work, my boss noticed the shadows under my eyes. He asked me quietly if I was okay. I almost brushed it off, but instead, I said, "Actually, I could use some legal advice." Off the record, he leaned back, curious. "Family or business?" "Both," I answered. And so I explained. Not in detail, not yet, but enough for him to point me in the right direction. He connected me with a property lawyer who specialized in inheritance disputes. By evening, I was sitting in an office surrounded by walls of law books, holding my mother's original deed like it was a lifeline. The lawyer skimmed it, adjusted his glasses, and smiled faintly. "Your stepmother doesn't stand a chance. This house is yours." I felt a rush of relief, but it was quickly followed by anger. Anger at my father, who knew this all along and still chose her side. Anger at myself for letting them treat me like a guest in my own mother's home. The lawyer gave me options. File immediately, freeze any attempt to sell, and reclaim the house. The word reclaim lit a fire in my chest. I signed the papers that night. When I came back home, Dad and my stepmother were watching TV like nothing was wrong. I stood in the doorway, clutching the signed documents in my bag, and for the first time in years, I smiled, not a forced, polite smile, but one that felt dangerous, almost wicked. "Everything okay?" Dad asked, not looking up. I answered calmly, "Oh, better than okay." Because little did they know, the countdown had already started. 2 weeks later, the tension in the house was unbearable. My stepmother had grown bolder, stomping through the hallways like a queen, barking orders at me as if I was some kind of live-in maid. "Did you forget to clean the kitchen again?" she snapped one night, pointing at a single glass in the sink. I bit back a laugh. A single glass. The same glass she had left there, but I didn't argue. Not yet. Because I knew what was coming. That same evening, while she fussed with throw pillows on the couch, the doorbell rang. She gave me a smug look. "Go see who that is." I opened the door, and there stood a court officer with a thick envelope in his hands. "Delivery for the current occupants of this residence," he said. My father walked over, confused. "What's this about?" The officer handed him the papers, nodded, and left without another word. I watched silently as Dad's face drained of color while he skimmed through the notice. My stepmother snatched it from his hands, her face twisted in disbelief. What the? A court order? She read aloud, her voice trembling with rage. Effective immediately. All sale or transfer proceedings of this property are frozen pending legal review. Ownership rights remain under the beneficiary, Emily Carter. The room went dead silent. I stepped forward. Calm. Steady. My heart hammered in my chest, but on the outside, I was ice. Yes, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Beneficiary. That's me. Her jaw dropped. You tricked us. No, I said evenly, meeting her eyes. You tried to steal what wasn't yours. I'm just taking back what my mother left me. My father looked at me, stunned, his lips parting like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. For once, he didn't defend her. He just sat there speechless as she turned red with fury. This isn't over. She spat. You'll regret this. But for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned in, lowering my voice to a whisper only she could hear. No, you'll regret ever thinking you could erase my mother's name from this house. She froze, her eyes wide, because she knew I wasn't bluffing. That night, as they sulked in the living room, I closed the door to my bedroom and allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The war had officially begun. The fallout began sooner than I expected. Within days of the court order, whispers spread through the neighborhood. People had noticed the sudden halt in the for sale listing, and word got out that my stepmother's grand plans weren't going as smoothly as she bragged. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering near the produce aisle. Did you hear? The house isn't theirs to sell. Really? But she said she was the owner. She lied. Turns out, it's the daughter's house. Her mother left it to her. I didn't even try to hide my smile as I walked past them. My stepmother thrived on gossip. Now it was devouring her alive. At home, the atmosphere grew more toxic by the day. She stormed around the house, slamming doors, muttering curses under her breath whenever I entered a room. One evening, she snapped completely. You think you've won? She screamed, her face twisted with rage. You're nothing but a parasite. Without this house, you'd be on the street. I set down my tea calmly. Funny. Without me, you wouldn't even be living in this house. Her eyes widened like I had slapped her. Dad tried to intervene, his voice weak. Enough, both of you know Henry. She cut him off. She needs to be put in her place. This is my home now. I turned slowly to her, meeting her eyes with a sharp, icy stare. Legally, it isn't. And soon, it won't even be yours to step foot in. Her face went pale. Because what she didn't know, what I had carefully kept hidden, was that I had already taken the next step. My lawyer had filed a petition to evict unauthorized occupants. And guess who counted as unauthorized? That night, while she ranted and raved in the kitchen, I lay in bed replaying everything in my head. My mother's voice, her smile, the promise I had once whispered at her grave. I'll protect what's ours. For the first time since she passed, I felt like I was truly keeping that promise. But little did I know, my stepmother wasn't done. She had one last, desperate card to play, and it would drag my father into the middle in a way I never expected. The storm broke 2 weeks later. I came home one evening to find my father waiting for me in the living room. He looked nervous, like a man rehearsing a confession he didn't want to make. His hands fidgeted against his knees, his eyes avoiding mine. Dad, what's going on? I asked, setting my bag down. He cleared his throat, his voice uneven. Your stepmother. She wants to contest the will. My heart sank. Contest the will? On what grounds? There's nothing to contest. She says your mother was not of sound mind when she signed it, he muttered. That she was manipulated into leaving everything to you. The sheer audacity made me laugh. A bitter, humorless sound. Manipulated? By who, Dad? Me. I was barely holding myself together while she was in chemo. And your wife thinks I masterminded an inheritance scheme? He flinched. But I wasn't done. Do you realize what she's doing? I demanded. She's dragging Mom's memory through the mud. She's spitting on her name just to grab money that doesn't belong to her. She's desperate, Dad whispered, his voice cracking. She says if she loses the house, we'll have nowhere to go. She's asking me to stand with her in court. That was the knife twist. She wants you to testify against Mom's will. My voice shook. Against your late wife, the woman who built this home with you. The woman who trusted you to protect me. His silence said everything. I stared at him, my chest burning. So that's it. You'd rather betray Mom's memory and me just to keep her happy. His eyes welled with guilt. I don't want to lose her, sweetheart. I've lost too much already. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My own father was about to side with the woman trying to steal everything. My mother left me, but instead of breaking me, it hardened me. Then do it, I whispered, my voice like ice. Stand with her. Testify. But know this, if you do, you won't just lose the case. You'll lose me. He blinked, shocked. You don't mean that. I mean every word, I said, my eyes locked on his. You already let her chip away at Mom's legacy. You let her call me names in the home that isn't hers. But if you take the stand against me, Dad, I'll never forgive you. The room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, he looked down, his shoulders slumping like a man carrying too much weight. But I didn't wait for an answer. I picked up my bag, walked to my room and shut the door. That night, lying in the dark, I realized something. My stepmother wasn't fighting for the house anymore. She was fighting for control, and she was willing to use my father as her weapon. But she underestimated one thing. I wasn't the scared little girl she thought she could bully. I was my mother's daughter. And I was about to fight back harder than ever. I didn't realize until I stepped into the CAF how much my life had changed in such a short time. This wasn't just a place to grab a latte anymore, it was our place, the sanctuary Maya and I built from scratch. It had become a safe space for people who had felt invisible, people like me. And yet, here I was, staring at my father, of all people, sitting at a corner table like he belonged. He looked older, thinner maybe, but the arrogance hadn't faded. His suit was wrinkled, his tie undone. It was the first time I'd ever seen him so disheveled. Dad, I said softly, though my voice carried the sharpness of disbelief. He looked up, and for the first time in my life, I saw something flicker in his eyes, something that wasn't control, or anger, or superiority. It was something closer to desperation. Clara, he said, his voice low, you look different, stronger. I folded my arms, leaning against the back of the chair across from him. I am different, I said flatly. You made sure of that. He winced, and for a second, I thought maybe he had come to apologize. But no, he didn't come here for me. He came here for himself. Clara, things aren't going well. The firm, your brother, it's all falling apart. He paused, corrected himself. I need your help. The audacity of those words nearly knocked the air out of me. I need your help. This, from the man who had told me I wasn't real family. From the man who sided with Daniel when he sabotaged my future. From the man who laughed at my tears, who closed doors in my face, who made me feel worthless. I sat down, but not because he deserved my time. I sat down because I wanted to hear every single detail of his downfall. Go on, I said coldly. He leaned forward, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke. Daniel's been reckless. Gambling, bad investments, women, you name it. The firm is bankrupt, Clara. The house is mortgaged, the reputation's in shambles. I don't have anywhere to go. I almost laughed. The man who had once sat at the head of the table, dictating everyone's fate, now looked like a beggar in my CAF. My CAF, Dad, I said slowly, savoring every word. Do you remember when I came to you for help? When I begged you not to let Daniel ruin my chances, my future, my life? His face tightened. Clara, no, I cut him off. Do you remember what you said? His lips trembled, but he said nothing. So I said it for him. You told me I wasn't real family. You told me to figure it out myself. You said my pain was mine alone. So tell me, Dad, why shouldn't I say the same to you right now? He lowered his gaze, shame pooling in his features. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt triumphant. But instead, I just felt tired, because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes, revenge is the quiet satisfaction of knowing the tables have turned. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the floor. Enjoy your coffee, I said. It's on the house. Consider it the only kindness you'll ever get from me again. And I walked away, my heels clicking like punctuation marks against the tiled floor. Behind me, my father sat in silence. Small and powerless, exactly how he once made me feel. The difference was, I would walk out stronger and he had nowhere left to go. The day of the final showdown arrived like a storm I had been waiting for my entire life. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. Every seat was filled with people eager to see my stepmother's plan unravel, or perhaps, in her eyes, to witness my defeat. I walked in quietly, my head held high. The murmurs of the spectators faded as I passed. I wasn't the timid girl they remembered. I wasn't the helper, the invisible one, the replaceable daughter. I was clarity, precision, and control wrapped in one calm, determined presence. My lawyer gave me a reassuring nod. I gave one back. And then it began. My stepmother started with theatrics, claiming my mother had been manipulated and unfit to sign her will. She painted herself as the victim, my father as the poor, conflicted husband, and me as the greedy, opportunistic daughter. But every word she said, I had anticipated. Every exaggeration, every lie, I had evidence for. Emails from my mother notarized. Statements, even my father's own writings corroborated the truth. When it was my turn, I walked to the front. I looked directly at the judge, then at the jury, then at my family, who all sat frozen in disbelief. My mother loved this house. I began, my voice steady, carrying into every corner of the room. She built it with care, with sweat, with pride, and she left it to me not because I am perfect, not because I am flawless, but because I am her daughter, and she trusted me to protect it. My stepmother, I continued, has tried to take what isn't hers. My father has let her manipulate him. But here is the truth, the law, the evidence, and my mother's intentions are clear. This house has always been mine, and nothing she says can change that. I paused, letting it sink in. The room was silent when the judge ruled in my favor. It was almost anticlimactic in its finality. The property remains with the rightful owner, Emily Carter, he said. Any attempt to sell or occupy without permission is void. Case closed. I let the words wash over me. Relief, satisfaction, vindication. I turned to see my stepmother's face pale, disbelief written in every line. My father slumped in his chair, shame heavier than any sentence could be. And Ethan, oh, Ethan, he looked like he had just swallowed a lemon whole. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The law had done what my words could not. It had made them powerless. Months later, I transformed the house into more than just a home. It became an office, a hub for my growing business, a place where dreams were nurtured, not stolen. My app expanded into multiple campuses, then cities, then states. Investors came, users flourished, and suddenly, the little girl, who was invisible, dismissed, and belittled, had built an empire from nothing. And every time I walked through the doors of my mother's house, now humming with life, laughter, and opportunity, I felt her presence with me. I had not just reclaimed property, I had reclaimed my identity, my worth, and my power. I never looked back at my family the same way. They existed in my life only as echoes of the past, reminders of what I had overcome. And that was enough, because revenge isn't just about making others pay. Sometimes it's about proving to yourself that nothing, not betrayal, not mockery, not abandonment, can stop you from becoming the person you were always meant to be. And that is how I finally won not just the house, not just the money, not just the vindication, but my life. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you have any incident in your life, please let us know. We would love to share your story. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy.